Hello, my name is Stephen Lunsford. This is my media clip final project for Educating Exceptional Students. Course was taken in spring of 2019 and completed online. Throughout this project, I will be going over the many different disability areas that we learned this semester in our textbook. I will go over the characteristics of those disabilities and also ideas for universal design for learning to incorporate these students and their curriculum into the general education class. I'll start with learning disabilities. Characteristics here are there's no such thing as a typical student with learning disabilities. Commonly have average or above average intelligence. Challenges in how they learn and process new information generally causes low academic achievement in one or more areas. These students, unlike some of the other specific disabilities, you can't tell anything's wrong with them. You can have a student that's gotten 100% on every math test, every assignment they've ever had in their life, and they have a hard time reading or comprehending text or with English or something like that. Key to find out what's triggering them, what can you do to help them learn that specific subject. That'll fall in line with some of these universal design for learning ideas. One is these students generally have high rates of inclusion. One very important one is differentiated instruction. Like I said, find out the area that they're struggling in, how you can help them. If they struggle with reading, can you supply them with an audiobook or a visual representation? Record your lectures so they can watch it on YouTube again. Another idea is advanced organizers. You'll see that a lot through this project. What these are is basically a visual representation of where you came from, where you are, and where you're going. What you have learned, how that relates to what you're learning now, and where that will take you in the future, what you need to learn, how to get to where you need to go. Next will be communication disorders. Characteristics here are they have difficulty with speech, language, or both. Speech disorders refer to difficulty producing sounds or fluency of words, such as a hoarse voice or stutter. Language disorders entail difficulty receiving, understanding, or formulating ideas. Articulation disorders are most common. They include errors in substitution, omissions, additions, and distortions. Speech disorders, those students have trouble with the actual speech, self-explanatory. Language disorders, they have trouble translating the ideas they're trying to say into the actual speech. They can talk fine, it just doesn't come out right. Universal design for learning for these students, some ideas are augmentative and alternative communication system. If you have a student that really just can't communicate, they have iPad programs, computer programs, different individual programs with icons on there. Say maybe there's a water fountain. If they need to go get a drink, they can push that button to communicate with the teacher they need to get a drink. If they want to raise their hand, there's a button, anything like that. They can communicate through symbols. Very formatted delivering information. That's probably pretty important on a lot of these too. Verbal, graphic, audio, that's some examples. Find out how the kid learns best. Differentiate your instruction to how the kid learns best to help them, as long as they're mastering what they need to know. Allow different forms of assignments. That one's pretty important with these students. You wouldn't want a student with a speech disorder to have to get up in front of the class and do a presentation. Maybe allow them to do a PowerPoint or do a written report and turn it into you. Graphic organizers, again, is another important one here. Those students can benefit from those. Emotional and behavior disorders. Characteristics here are inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors, social issues, inappropriate behavior, pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. Common theme here is social issues. I haven't been in a special education class yet, but I assume these are some of the most difficult students to teach and to keep your cool and to get them on the right track. Acting out in class, stuff like that. Some ideas for universal design for learning here: classroom-centered intervention. What that can be is maybe gearing some of your curriculum towards proper behavior, not only for just that student, but for the class. Conflict resolution, discussing with your student if he has an issue, what happened, why did it happen, what can we do next time to prevent that. Behavior tracking with the use of technological apps. There's apps out there now on an iPad, iPhone, cell phone, whatever, where they can monitor how they're doing, not just behavior-wise, but education-wise. And that's also a good way to self-monitor and put some of that responsibility on them and teach them that. Positive behavior supports, I feel that's very important to these students. You cannot give them enough positive reinforcement. Less negative, more positive, obviously. Try to ignore the small stuff, big stuff, if somebody's getting hurt, stuff like that, definitely you're going to have to intervene there. Also, one on here I'll get to it later, but it's very important on all these, is to teach their peers how to interact and deal with those type of behaviors also. That's pretty important on most of these. Students with ADHD, characteristics are, there are two types: prominently inattentive type, which they have trouble with focus and staying on task, and predominantly hyperactive impulse type. These students have trouble holding still, keeping their hands and feet to themselves, and talking excessively. There's also some students that display characteristics of both. Some ideas for universal design for learning with these students would be classroom modifications to aid in organizational skills. If you have a student that has trouble staying on task or staying focused, if their notebook that they need for third hour is on the same shelf every day and they know exactly where it is to get it, that's going to help. If they get out, if they can move from class to class at the exact same time every day, that's going to help. You can definitely make changes to your classroom to help these students out by staying organized. Goal setting is also very important, again, if they have trouble staying on task. Very important for these students to know, if they have a big assignment, what to do. I have this to do by this time, and this is what I have to do it. Then I need to do this. This is what I have to do to get it done until completion. They need to know what they need to do, when they need to do it by, and put that all in order to where it's all done. Monitoring of medication. A lot of these students will be on medication. We cannot suggest any medication. These will always be addressed in an IEP. Definitely important to keep in contact with the family. These medications are not really simple. A lot of them do the opposite, can have adverse effects. So you need to get those straightened out. And video self-monitoring is another one. Taking a video of a student modeling positive behavior and having them watch that. So this is what you're expected to do. And then when they don't do that, pretty good example for them to look back on. Next is intellectual disabilities. These students' characteristics have significant limitations in intellectual functioning, significant limitations in adaptive behaviors expressed in conceptual, social, and practical adaptive skills, memory limitations, inability to transfer knowledge from one environment to task to another. Universal design for learning for these students are e-reader programs. Some of these students are going to have trouble reading. So again, there's text-to-speech applications to where they don't have to manually read the assignments. They can have it read it aloud to them, and they'll learn that better. Functional curriculum outside of the classroom for real-world experiences. That's very important, as it says, an ability to transfer knowledge from one environment or task to another. They can learn something in a classroom, say how to use money, time management, and they have a hard time transferring that to the real-world environment outside of the classroom. So important to take them out, do stuff like that, and they can try to figure that out. Goal setting, very important also. That's important on a lot of these too. Peer teaching is another good one. Again, the more you can get your peers involved, most of these disabilities are going to have some social issues involved with them. Peer teaching is going to help with not only the education side, but the social side. Autism, characteristics. There's social communication impairments, which include social emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communication, and maintaining relationships. Repetitive behaviors and interests, and problem behavior such as self-injurious behavior and aggression. These students can be pretty challenging also, and again, there's some definite social skill issues here. Universal design for learning ideas here, mnemonic strategies. A lot of these students will have trouble with memory. These strategies are just ideas to help them remember, relate things to something else. The word you're trying to learn sounds like this word you already know, so you can remember it that way, stuff like that. Promote friendships. Again, that's going to be a big one on any of these. Positive behavior support. Clearly define appropriate behavior. This can be school-wide. A lot of schools do that. This can be class-wide. This could be just for the student, but it is definitely important to define exactly what it is to these students, what appropriate behavior is. A lot of times they don't know what they're doing that is inappropriate. So if they don't know what's wrong, it's not going to get better. All right, traumatic brain injury can be an interesting one. Characteristics here, they can range greatly based on severity of the injury, but all these students have suffered and acquired injury after birth. Characteristics align with the particular site, the area of the brain, and the extent of the injury. Difficulties paying attention and translating information is definitely one of the big characteristics here. Universal design for learning ideas, differentiate instruction. Again, that's a very important one, and how information is presented, allow multiple options. They could kind of roll into the next one, very instructional pacing to allow adequate processing time while monitoring responses. These students can have trouble paying attention, translating information, like it says prior. Give them time. Sometimes it'll take them a little bit longer. Give them a chance. Problem solving and decision making instruction. Be a good idea to incorporate some of that into your curriculum for the entire class. This is what we're facing. This is what we need to do. This is the outcome. Hearing loss. There's 2 levels of hearing loss. Deaf includes students with hearing loss of 70 to 90 decibels or greater and unable to use hearing as a primary means of developing language. If you can't hear, you can't understand what you're hearing, it's hard to develop any language. Then there's hard of hearing. These students have hearing loss in the 20 to 70 decibel range. They can benefit from amplification and communicate through language. These students' hearing isn't bad enough to where they can't understand language. Hearing aids often help with these students and they can figure out language from there. Some ideas for universal design for learning for these students is sign language, lesson planning for hearing impaired students. You never know when you're going to have hearing impaired. Well, I guess you probably could, but definitely a good idea to have ideas in place for hearing impaired students in all your lesson plans, whether you have a hearing impaired student or not. Graphic organizers and hands-on experiences. Again, that's going to be important for these students. The graphic organizers, hands-on experiences will definitely help them too. And provide a deaf role model is one I really like. Find a not necessarily a student, but an adult in the town that speaks good sign language. Have them go to the store with them, see what they need to do, teach them stuff outside of the classroom will definitely be beneficial to them. Visual impairments, characteristics. Similar to hearing impaired, 3 classifications of visual impairment. There's low vision, functionally blind, and totally blind. Low vision can read, but they need some help. Functionally, they can read Braille, but they can't read regular text, can read Braille, and they can function in their environment. Totally blind, they do not receive any meaningful input through visual sense. Some of the ideas here are Braille writing, abacus for calculating, with the pretty self-explanatory, assistive technology such as text-to-speech programs like we mentioned before. If they can't read, they can read Braille, but surely they can read an audiobook. And daily living skills, probably pretty important here too, if you can incorporate some of that into the curriculum for these students in your class. That's going to be a lifelong deal for them. It's not going to go away when they're done with school. It's not going to get any better. Overall, I have an overview, key points, a few things that I thought were relevant on all of these. Differentiated instruction, I think you need to have it in all of your classes no matter what. You're going to have students that learn different. You're going to have to learn these students. You're going to have to know what makes them tick. So that'll go along with learning how your students learn. Appropriate IEP is also very important for medication, assistive technology. Any kind of differentiated instruction can be addressed at that point. Any kind of adaptations you need to the classroom, very important there. Obviously, that's probably one of the biggest things. Assistive technology, I just kind of touched on that. Text-to-speech type stuff. Any kind of physical wheelchair ramps, those have to be addressed. Communication with students' family is also very important. Like I said, for the medication, for any kind of behavioral issues, say, hey, is there any, just wanted you to know they've been acting out pretty bad. Is anything going on? Is there anything we need to do? And another very important one that I find kind of close to the heart is support peer relationships. Most of these students will do better socially if their peers are accepting of them. Definitely important to communicate with the peers of these students and let them know how to act around these children. Let them know what to do if something bad happens. Encourage them to be their friends, or at least communicate with them or acknowledge them. That goes a long ways with a lot of these special needs students. But that's all I've got. Thank you.